Hello, happy Halloween. So today I'm going to obviously talk about some Halloween fragrances, but I'm also going to talk about why we associate particular objects and creatures with Halloween. What is it about a vampire, a witch, a cat, or a pumpkin that makes us instantly think of Halloween? I'm going to take those objects and creatures and I'm going to associate fragrances with each of them. So if you've ever wondered what fragrance a cat would wear if they could choose a fragrance, you will find out in this video. So if that kind of thing interests you, then please consider subscribing if you haven't done already, and also please like this video if you do like this video. So let's get on with this. So let's start off with vampires. Vampires are actually documented in many cultures around the world, all the way back to ancient Greece in fact. But actually the most famous vampire, and probably the one that most people are familiar with, is the one that was written about by Bram Stoker in the 1800s. The book Dracula was originally titled The Undead, and Dracula is something that's grown out of Romanian, Hungarian and Slovakian folk tales. So quite often tales of vampires talk about vampires needing blood for nourishment, but also they like blood for pleasure. Vampires are known to exert hypnotic and sensual effects on their victims. But why are vampires a thing? Why have they sprung up in all these different cultures all around the world? Well, there are several explanations for vampires, but the first one is that they actually help to explain the movements and sounds of the recently dead. So when you think about how a vampire acts and what the vampire looks like, they're often described as very pale, but with a blotchy kind of colouring. They have blood around their mouths, and they often make groaning sounds, much like a dead corpse might when air is being produced, gas is being produced from decomposition inside them, and the air is whistling through their vocal cords. Also, during the process of decomposition, the skin recedes and gums recede as well, which can mean that teeth can appear larger than they were in life, which again sounds very much like a vampire, doesn't it? Another reason why vampires might exist is as an explanation for the spread of diseases. When people didn't understand how diseases were spread, they thought their dead relatives came back to spread diseases like consumption. So, for example, in the 1800s in New England, there was a huge tuberculosis outbreak, and that led to a huge rise in the belief of vampires in that area. And people would actually dig up their relatives and burn their hearts to try to stop the spread of the disease in their family because they believed that this relative was infecting people as a vampire. So if all these cultures around the world believe in vampires, how can we prove that they don't exist? Well, weirdly, in 2006, a physics professor actually did a mathematical equation to basically prove that if the first vampire had appeared in 1600, which is when the belief in vampires became very popular, then if a vampire actually fed only once a month, which is less often than is recorded in most literature, then the spread of vampirism would have been exponential to the point at which within 2 years, the whole world's population at the time would have been a vampire. So you can see how it's actually mathematically impossible for the world to have any vampires in it whatsoever, because we would all be vampires. So now we know that vampires are unlikely to exist. How would I scent them? Well, I think that vampires are creatures of the night. They're always looking for their next meal. They're always looking for their next victim. So they're quite seductive in a way. But there are a few scent notes that vampires are probably likely to hate. A vampire probably wouldn't choose a rose fragrance because roses are said to keep vampires away. So in Dracula, rose branches are actually placed in people's coffins to try to keep Dracula away from them. And also rose thorns are said to keep vampires in their graves, and rose petals are said to be damaging to vampires. So yeah, vampires just don't like the scent of roses basically. Vervain, hawthorn and juniper are also said to keep vampires at bay. So I'm going to choose fragrances that don't have any of those notes in them. So how would I scent a vampire? Well, I'm going to choose probably the most Halloween of all fragrances. Let's just get it out of the way straight away. It's Tom Ford's Black Orchid. So I think a vampire would love this one because it's got that earthiness. It's going to remind them of their grave. It's also going to remind them of the dark, mysterious night. It's a very seductive fragrance. If they're looking for their next victim, this is going to lure them in. And, you know, vampires have that mind control thing going on, don't they, as well? in certain circumstances. They have those sort of sensual effects on their victims, hypnotic effects. And I really feel like Black Orchid does that. So if you know Black Orchid, you'll know it's a deep patchouli fragrance with a lovely kind of truffle note and almost a slight, like, not sweet, but kind of chocolatey in a way kind of feel to it. But it also has those spices, just like a vampire's kiss, just like a vampire's bite. It's also beautifully woody and it also lasts forever and it's just irresistible, just like a vampire. So that's my first choice for a vampire, Black Orchid. So my second choice for a vampire is going to be another one from Tom Ford, and this is Noir Parfum. And this one is just a beautifully seductive, spicy, ambery vanilla fragrance. Just absolutely irresistible and another perfect scent for a vampire. My third choice for a vampire is Vampire Light. So this is, the just bitten kind of vampire. And this is Fatale Intense from Agent Provocateur. So this fragrance is a beautifully sticky, sweet fragrance, but it also has a weird hot spicy thing going on with a chilly, gingery note of some kind. It's a really strange thing to experience this fragrance. It's really unexpected if you're not looking for that. And to me, this is like the just bitten vampire. This is junior vampire. This is, a little bit still shy, but, learning the craft of vampirism. So that's Fatale Intense by Agent Provocateur. So next, why are witches associated with Halloween and where did witches come from? During the 16th century, many people believed that witchcraft was at fault for all of the ills of the world. So someone's child died, a crop failed, whatever it was a witch. It was the old woman down the road living near you who had a cat. She was to blame for all of your misfortune. Witch hunting became an obsession in some parts of Britain, and by 1542 there were laws in place against witchcraft and it became an offence that was punishable by death. Later on, in the early 1600s, King James I was obsessed with witches. And actually this is shown by Shakespeare writing Macbeth for King James I and featuring witches in several of its acts. Formal accusations against witches, who were usually older women, reached a peak in the late 16th century. And actually 513 people were accused of witchcraft between 1560 and 1700 in England alone. Of these, 112 were executed. And in total in England, around 500 people were put to death. So in more modern times, witches are thought of as probably intelligent women who were misunderstood, or perhaps mentally ill women who were misunderstood, or even women that just didn't fit the moulds of society, who didn't have a husband, who didn't have children, or who lived alone, or perhaps even were just wise and had herbal remedies to try to help local people with their illnesses and their complaints. And, suspicions grew and they got accused of witchcraft. So where does the broom association come from with witches? Why do we think of witches as riding brooms? Well, there was actually a pagan ritual started by farmers who would actually leap astride poles, pitchforks and brooms in order to encourage their crops to grow in some kind of pagan fertility ritual. And this was carried out usually in the light of a full moon. So I think probably throughout history there's been some kind of mix-up where that's turned into women flying on brooms in front of full moons, and so that's why we now associate witches with brooms. Also, brooms are a very domestic object and women were associated with a home, so it makes sense for brooms to be associated with women. Despite this, the first person to be convicted of riding a broom was actually male, and this guy was a priest in 15th century France, and he had actually spoken out against the Catholic Church, saying that he felt the persecution of witches was wrong. And I think really his confession under torture and his conviction may have something to do with him having spoken out against that. So which fragrance notes do I think a witch would like and a witch would not like? Well, witches actually were thought to make their brews and their concoctions out of certain herbs and plants. So they were thought to use mandrake, they were thought to use deadly nightshade, henbane, and datura, which is also called Jimson weed. And actually datura is a fragrance note that is found in quite a lot of mainstream perfumes actually. For example, I have Wanted Girl by Azzaro, and also I have Richie Richie by Nina Ricci, but I'm not 100% sure that I know exactly how datura smells, so I'm not going to pick those ones for witches. However, I feel like a lot of people who were convicted of being a witch in medieval times were just simply herbalists. So I'm going to honour them with herbal smelling fragrances, or ones with greener notes in them. So my first choice for a witch is going to be Aura by Mugler. So this fragrance is a green vanilla fragrance, but it also has that sort of herbal note of the rhubarb. The rhubarb gives it a little bit of sharpness, but you also get the creaminess of the vanilla. And it's just a very, very strange, almost jarring mix that kind of works. It's a really strange fragrance, this one. And I feel like the bottle as well just personifies a witch. It's just something that makes me think of witches, this sort of green heart. And I just think this fragrance has sort of something slightly enchanting about it. So that's my first choice for a witch, Aura by Mugler. So my other choice would be the ultimate in bewitching, and that is KVD's Sinner. So this bottle even just looks like a potion, doesn't it? It looks like you're going to drug someone with this fragrance. So this fragrance has that earthy enchantment of the patchouli. It also has that bewitching jasmine, but also a slightly boozy plum note as well, almost like a love tonic, a love potion. So that's my other choice for a witch, KVD Sinner. And finally, the wise woman in the forest, keeping herself to herself and gathering her blackberries, would be wearing Gucci Guilty Absolute Parfum. So this fragrance is a blackberry rose fragrance, but it's also a little bit herbal in a way. It is very medicinal smelling at points in this fragrance. And the opening is like a fruity herbal rose, but with a lot of woody patchouli and a little bit of cypress in it. It's just an absolutely intoxicating fragrance, and it's deep, dark and forest-like. So Gucci Guilty Absolute Parfum. So what about black cats? Why are they associated with witches and with Halloween? Well, cats have been associated with humans throughout our history. If you go back to ancient Egypt, then we worshipped cats. If you go back to ancient Greece, then there was a goddess called Hecate, who was the goddess of the moon, magic, sorcery and witchcraft. And she had a cat. She had a familiar. A familiar is a being that helps their mistress to achieve their mystical aims. So actually, written records link black cats to the occult from the early 1200s. So in 1233, Pope Gregory IX put out a decree saying that black cats were a form of Satan. This decree marked the beginning of the Inquisition and church-sanctioned witch hunts and cat hunts. By the 1200s, as the church gained power, witches were seen as a threat. And that meant that they were the next victims, basically, along the church's hunger for power. Witches were seen as threats because they honoured the natural world. They had knowledge of the natural world. And it was because of this that any kind of connection between animals and humans was seen as devilish. Old ladies with cats became suspicious. Another reason why cats may be associated with witches is because witches tended to be people who were independent, who lived outside of society. And cats are very much like that too. Cats don't please you. They don't aim to please at all. They're not like dogs. They don't do what they're told. Cats exhibit a healthy disrespect of authority, just like suspected witches might have done. At some point in history, the pairing of witches narrowed to black cats. And it's not really clear why this association was or how it grew out of general cats. But there are theories put forward that witches would have tended towards cats that were black because cats that are black make better mousers. They can't be seen at night. And actually, probably women living alone probably didn't want mice in their houses, and probably a black cat was a very sensible choice. So of course it was this belief that black cats could be Satan that led to the superstition of them crossing your path being bad. And actually also it was believed that witches could turn themselves into cats, and that's why a cat crossing your path could be bad. Also, the witch could have sent their cat to do you harm, and that's why the cat may be crossing your path. So you can see where that superstition grew from. So which fragrance would I choose for a cat? Well, there are certain fragrance notes that cats probably wouldn't like. So I don't think they'd like lily, for example, because lilies can be poisonous to cats, as can many other flowers in effect. But I do think that cats are very majestic creatures, so I think they'd have quite a big fragrance, and they would also choose something that was definitely something for them. They wouldn't fawn to public opinion. It would be something that was quite extreme, I think. So fragrance houses have cottoned on to the fact that people love their animals and love their cats, and actually Demeter or the Library of Fragrance have actually brought out a perfume already called Kitten Fur. So I don't think a cat would wear that, but that's one you might wear to remind yourself of a cat. I, though, think a cat would wear something more opulent, something more over the top. So the one that I'm going to choose for a cat is going to be a big fragrance, and this big fragrance is Milano Fragranzi La Prima. So this fragrance is based on the idea of a woman visiting an opera in a fur coat, getting dressed up and, watching something marvellous, basically. This fragrance, to me, is a lot. I find this one quite overwhelming, and when you first spray it, there is an overwhelming feeling of like the musk and the fur. It's just quite big. And I just think that a cat would absolutely love this fragrance. It's just so, I don't care, is how I feel about this fragrance. I think, yeah, it's a lot. But other than that fur and that musk, it is kind of a little bit bitter in a way, or herbal. And it's also very, very floral and very sweet. It's very, very sweet, this fragrance. And I just think that a cat would suit this one down to a ground. So that's my first choice for a cat, La Prima by Milano Fragranzi. My second choice for a cat would again be a musky fragrance. And this one is a very powdery musk, a very clean, but also slightly creamy musk. And it's La Nuit Trésor Musc Diamant. So this is a flanker of La Nuit Trésor from Lancôme. And this one is a very bright, very sparkly musk. This fragrance makes me think of a black cat in a diamond collar. So yeah, La Nuit Trésor Musc Diamant by Lancôme is my second choice for a cat. So my third choice for a cat kind of reflects them enjoying their creature comforts at home, reflects them wanting to be near their human owners or their witch owners and snuggling up to them and, perhaps caressing their skin and being given a little saucer of cat milk to enjoy. So my choice is going to be Piano Santal by L'Orchestre Perfumes. So this is a milky, skin-like sandalwood fragrance, but it's also quite sweet. I think this fragrance would be catnip to a cat. I think this would make them think of their owner, it would make them think of home, and it would make them think of safety. So I think this would be the kind of thing that would make them come home to their witches to enjoy their snuggling on the sofa. So this is Piano Santal by L'Orchestre Perfume. So next, let's look at why we actually carve lanterns. Why do we carve pumpkins? It's because of a little tale called Stingy Jack. So Stingy Jack was a folk tale that was told in Ireland many, many centuries ago. And it tells the tale of this guy called Jack, who was on his way somewhere when the devil stepped into his path. And Jack knew his time was up and the devil wanted to take his soul to hell. But Jack begged the devil and said that he was desperate for a drink, and could they go for a drink first before the devil took him to hell. The devil was surprisingly very nice and said, yes, sure, let's go to the pub. So the devil took him to the pub, and Jack had several drinks. He didn't just have one, he had several. And at the end of the evening, he said to the devil, I don't have any money to pay for these drinks. So the devil actually transformed himself into a coin for Jack's pocket so that he could pay for his drinks and they could leave. But unbeknownst to the devil, Jack actually had a crucifix in his pocket, which meant that the devil couldn't retransform back into being a devil without Jack's help. So Jack actually made a pact with the devil at this point and said, well, devil, if you don't take my soul for 10 years, then I will let you out of my pocket by removing the crucifix. If you don't, then I won't. So the devil had no choice. The devil said, okay, I will come in 10 years and take your soul, but I will leave you alone for these intervening years as long as you let me go. So Jack agreed the devil went on his way. So 10 years passed, and this time Jack was on the same road and the devil appeared, and Jack knew his time was up again. So this time he said that he needed something to eat. He was just so hungry that he needed to eat something before the devil took him to hell. So the devil again weirdly agreed, and this time he climbed a tree to retrieve an apple for Jack to eat. Jack surrounded the trunk with crucifixes and trapped the devil in the tree, and again made another pact with the devil. This time Jack said that he would let the devil out of the tree by removing the crucifixes if the devil agreed never to take his soul to hell. Again, the devil had no choice and had to agree to Jack's demands. So Jack removed the crucifixes and the devil went on his way, somewhat annoyed. Many years later, Jack had been continuing to live a bad life, and he found himself at the end of his life and nearing death. And again, the devil appeared, but only to watch Jack. When Jack did die, he went to God, and God would not allow him to enter heaven because of his bad ways. And so he begged the devil to allow him to enter hell. The devil refused because he was keeping to his deal with Jack. And the devil said to Jack that he would have to roam the earth between heaven and hell for the rest of eternity. But because the devil wanted to show Jack what he was missing, the devil gave him a coal to remind him of hell. And so Jack put the coal inside a hollowed out turnip, and he carried this for the rest of his eternity. So that's why we carve pumpkins, because the carved turnip turned into different vegetables in different locations. So in England, people would carve potatoes or even beets. And when people emigrated to North America, the pumpkin was a native fruit. So people decided to carve pumpkins in order to make lanterns there. And that's stuck. That they just look the most impressive. They're that beautiful orange colour. And that is the vegetable that we all tend to carve now. So in actual fact, our pumpkins are a reflection of our jack-o'-lanterns, or our jack-of-the-lantern from Stingy Jack. So how would I scent Stingy Jack? Well, I think that Stingy Jack is someone who enjoys a drink in life. He's someone who's probably susceptible to other vices in life as well, perhaps a bit of smoking. And he just likes to have a good time, doesn't he? So I'm going to pick fragrances to represent that. I'm also going to pick fragrances to represent his interactions with the devil. So perhaps something a little bit warmer, a little bit spicier. So the first fragrance I'm going to pick for Stingy Jack is one from Serge Lutens, and this is Baptême du Feu by Serge Lutens. So this is a gingery cinnamon, very warm, very spicy, but also orange fragrance. So it makes me think of pumpkins because of that orange feel to this fragrance. It has a beautiful cedary woody base, and it's supposed to also have a note of gunpowder in it. But honestly, I don't smell the gunpowder in this fragrance, and I wish I did, because that would be really exciting. And I think that would be very reflective of Jack and his life. So that's Baptême du Feu by Serge Lutens. My second choice is a fragrance that to me has a slightly boozy and indulgent feel to it, and it also has tobacco and cherry. And this one is Kayali's Invite Only. So this has that sort of slight cool spiciness that I really like in fragrances, and it's just a very warm, inviting fragrance with that amber. It really makes me think of that interaction with the devil and with his obsession with drink and his other vices in life. So that's Invite Only by Kayali. My third choice for Stingy Jack is actually me imagining what his other vices are. So this fragrance is actually a tobacco fragrance, and it is Theodorus Calatinus Tobacco Maniac. So I absolutely love this fragrance because it's a very golden, very honeyed tobacco. It's really sweet, but it is still very strong on the tobacco. And I just think that Jack would probably like this if he likes booze and he likes playing with the devil. I just think that this one would be something that he would also enjoy. It would be another vice for him. So that's Tobacco Maniac by Theodorus Calatinus. So that's my final choice for Halloween. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have liked this video, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know what you're doing for Halloween. Are you going out? Are you dressing up? I'd really be interested to find out what fragrance you'll be wearing and what you're going to be doing for Halloween. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.